beginning stuff. If you haven't ever been on a meeting, I'll cover a little bit about your interface here real quick. If you notice in your interface, you will see a few areas that will be important for you, especially on the call. The first one, if you look at the minimize UI button, it gives you a little bit more real estate. So if you pick the orange arrow, it actually collapses this interface so you can see more of your screen. So if you haven't ever used it before, go ahead and pick that. You can also expand it back out with that. Also, you know that you can log on through your telephone or also through your mic and speakers on your machine. Either way works just fine. And then one thing that I do and leave time for at the end of the session is for questions. So if you look at the bottom, you'll have a question panel. Please type your questions. We won't take them live. Sometimes that can be chaotic, so we try to leave our questions in type form, and I will try to leave anywhere from 10 to 15 minutes at the end of the session to answer questions that you may have. My information will also be up, so that doesn't mean if you can't get your question, you also can send me an email. So that'll be available, but all questions will be typed in and be answered towards the end of the session, not during. So who am I? My name is Ben Givehand. I am one of the application engineers for BWIR. I am also the training manager. If you're not familiar with BWIR, if you haven't been on one of these with us before, we are a value-added reseller for PTC. We provide solutions for the most part around PTC products. We also do provide ERP services, but we support all of PTC's products and that you see up there, you know, Windchill and Creo and ProE and MathCAD and Arbortex. We do implementations of all of those solutions. We also do services around those solutions, and then you also see training towards the bottom. Again, for those of you that have been on before, you've seen that list before, but it continues to grow. We have added a Tampa Bay facility here lately. So if anybody or if any of our users out there are looking for training at any point in time, we do provide not only on-site training, but also custom training. So if you're looking for a specific class and you don't see it out on the PTC website, you can feel free to call us up. One thing that's a little bit unique about how we do our training, we do offer our customers, if they don't see a class out there, we'll gladly put up a class specifically for you. We run classes with even one student, so sometimes you'll see a class on the PTC website and they cancel it because they don't have enough students. You won't see that with us. So not only can you go to our website at the BWIR site, but all of our schedules are also on the PTC website. So there are our centers, and there's our website if you have any questions around that. And then again, you also can send me an email. You'll see my contact towards the end of the presentation. Okay? So just a little bit about me. We'll talk a little bit more about some training towards the end, just some real simple things, especially around the advanced modeling, the advanced modeling courses that are available from PTC. All right, so let's get into it. There is a lot of work that we have to do today. Hopefully we can fit all this in. But we're going to talk about some of the advanced modeling tools around Creo 2.0. Now, to be honest with you, most of these tools are not specific to Creo 2. I'm pretty sure maybe one or two might not be. You will see some differences in functionality and process, but even in Wildfire 5, most of these tools are available. There are a few that are not available in Wildfire 4 for those of our Wildfire 4 users. And if I can remember that as I'm going along, I'll point that out. Okay, but a lot of work to be done, and I'll try to get through all of this. But these are the essentially the functions that we will try to get to. Okay, there's only one more slide again because there's so much work, and I'll bring this back up when we get into conditional statements for relationships. But I'll bring that back up so we can talk about that a little bit later on. Okay, so we'll hop right into it from here. So the agenda, you know, I won't go back to the agenda slide. I'll just kind of start plowing through some of this stuff, but it does follow that. So I will go back to it if we kind of get off track, but I'll go from there. So the first one we're going to talk about are selection ideas that I have found that a lot of users don't necessarily use. Okay, and so when we talk about selection, we're talking about the ability to pick objects obviously? Well, a lot of times, most of us will just hold the control button and do different things when it comes around that. But there are selection techniques that I have found that a lot of users either have never been aware of or just don't use, okay? And so it not only is around edge selection, but also surface selection, okay? So most of us, I would assume most of us are fairly experienced users, and you go in and you pick an edge, right, and you pick multiple objects, and you go ahead and hold the control button, and you pick and you pick and you pick. But what you have found is when PTC went from the 2001 releases to the Wildfire releases, they condensed how edge selection happened, okay? And so, for instance, now, or I should say in previous versions, there was edge select and chain and then tangent chain. And for those of you that have never really paid attention to this or didn't know this, is that now, once I pick an edge, if you go over and pick the select, hold the select button, by default, you'll see that it starts out in tangent. And so here's the tangency selection. So all I'm doing is going to another edge, holding the shift button, and you see tangent. Now, at that point in time, all of the rest of the selection objects or functions are based out of your right clicks. So if I right click once, there is surface from to. So essentially, if I let go, it's going from this edge to that edge. So if I hold it again, there's tangent, there's surface from to that way, and if I pick it again, there's surface from to the other way, okay? So I have my surface, or essentially my loop selection techniques, but it's initiated out of the shift button and then the right click button that goes from tangency to surface loop from one side to surface loop on the other side, all right? So if I hold shift, here's one by one, right? Here's tangent, but again, if I right click, here's surface loop from one side, surface loop on the other side. Again, if you just hold the shift button when you go over there and then right click quickly, you switch between those two. Pretty straightforward, but if you've never really done that, most users will just hold the shift button and pick and pick and pick and pick and pick. Sometimes you mess up, you make the wrong pick, and so it makes it easy if you hold the shift button and you toggle through your right clicks and you get to that same point, okay? All right, so simple things like that, just for surface or for edge selection. We'll get to some more surface selection stuff here in just a second. Now, another thing that I have found that a lot of users are not aware of is that if I come in here, and most of us know this, right? If I come over here and put a round on edges, pretty straightforward, something like that. And then if I were to go in to this exact same extrude, and then if I were to modify that extrude in some form. Now most users know this, like I said, if I come over here and delete this, okay, if I delete that, then if I put in a new shape, whatever that shape may be, that when I go and finish this feature, let me drag this out the way so I can see that, is that my round is going to fail. And everybody should know that, being an experienced CAD user, okay? But if you haven't done this before, there's the idea of instead of using, excuse me, instead of using edges themselves, we use something called intent edges. And this is the way that it works. Is that if I go in and instead of picking the individual edge itself, if I quickly right-click, you will be in what is called intent edge selection. And I'll talk a little bit more about what that means here in just a second. But I'm going to use intent edges instead of the individual edges themselves. Now, what this does is that when I go in, again, change the extrude, we'll go back in and delete it and put something else in, is that if I drag a window, delete this guy, and put in something like that, or it could be, you know, I could also, let's do this, let's delete that and put in even something a little bit different just for giggles. If I do that, now what you'll see is you'll see the round that has adapted to it. Now, the reason this works this way is that when we created the round, instead of picking individual edges, we picked what was called intent. And what intent means, it is in the intent of the intersecting surfaces, not the individual edge IDs themselves. So for those of you that know this, right, this will kind of be a little bit repetitive, but essentially when you go in to pick a round, when you select an edge, you are really fundamentally selecting an edge ID number. And what happens is that when you go in and you pick that edge ID number, and if I go into the sketch and I get rid of that where that edge is created from, I get a new edge ID number. Well, when the round tries to regenerate, because that edge ID number does not exist anymore, you get failure. In this case, we're not selecting edge IDs. We're selecting the intent of the cutout. Now, here are the rules behind this, okay? Is that first of all, when I go to do an intent edge, notice how, let's clear this, is that when I right-click, I either get all of them or none of them. So I get all 5, I can't pick individual ones, and at this point in time, I can't go back in and unselect individual ones. So that's a little restrictive when it comes to it, okay? Also, if I were to take this cutout from this shape to a circle, because there are no more essentially vertical edges, then the round would still fail. So it's great for when you're changing shapes and have something similar as far as, you know, vertical edges, whether it's multiple or you're taking some of those vertical edges away. But if I take the vertical edges away altogether because I create a circle cutout, then at that point in time that round will still fail, which makes sense when you really think about it. Okay. So in this case, this is what intent edge is. It is selecting the intent of the cutout, not the individual edges themselves. And all I do to get to that is to quickly right-click, and you go from individual selecting to intent edge. There's intent edges. This is actually, you can use this in Wildfire 5. I'm pretty sure this is even available in Wildfire 4. Okay, so just right-clicking gets you into intent instead of picking individual objects. You can use intent on surfaces, on edges, on a number of different things. Draft, whatever it may be, it's just called intent. All right, so last little selection technique that we'll cover, okay? If I go in for whatever reason, let's say I want to pick this surface for copying or offset purposes or whatever it may be, if I wanted to pick multiple surfaces, a lot of us will go in again, hold the control button, and pick and pick and pick and pick and do multiple picks that way. The problem is with something like this, it's not horrible, right? Because you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, essentially 8 surfaces. But let's say it's 1,000, okay? 1,000 surfaces. You'll go in, you'll hold the control button, you'll start picking, pick. Sometimes you mess up, sometimes you pick out in space, and it unselects and all that other stuff, and it just drives you crazy, okay? So here are 2 selection techniques for surfaces that you can use. One is called loop surfaces. The other one is called seed and boundary, right? So here's the first one. Here's loop selection technique. Is that if I want to select all of these outside surfaces right here, okay, that form essentially a loop, they all are attached to 2 common surfaces, and it's this surface right here, and it's this surface on the bottom. There they are. Now, the way this works is that if I pick this surface, and then if I hold the shift button and come out to the edge, you will notice that all of those other surfaces highlighted around that were touching that top surface. Still holding the shift button. If I left click and let go, I have now selected all of those surfaces that were touching the loop of this top surface. So loop of this top surface, again, if I did it on the bottom, if I pick this surface, hold the shift button, come out to the edge, if I left click, I have selected all of those surfaces and I can offset them or do whatever you might do at that point in time, okay? That is called a loop surface selection. It's the surface, shift, go out to the edge, they highlight, you let go, and you can get those loops of that individual surface. This is called loop surface selection technique. The other one that you have is called seed and boundary. Now, the way I describe this, I try to describe this, is that it's like taking a drop of water, okay? If I put a drop of water onto a surface, wherever that drop of water can go is what gets selected. What I have to set up is the boundary, or in the way I'm describing this, is the dam, okay? So for instance, if I want to select all of these surfaces that are essentially attached to this little feature, the hole, and all these over here, again, yes, I can pick it and hold control and pick. Or what I can do is drop my water. Oops, sorry guys. Drop my water, and at that point in time, I'm going to hold shift, come over and pick that surface to set up the dam, and when I let go, I get all of those surfaces. So here was my seed surface. It's actually called seed and boundary, okay? So it's here's my seed surface. This surface makes up the boundary, and then all of the surfaces get selected. So that drop of water could travel all over here. There it is, and there is my stop. Now, same thing, if I were to put my drop of water, there's my seed. If I hold shift, set up my boundary, I get that result also. Now, you can pick multiple boundaries. So for instance, if I pick this surface, not that you would do this, there would be a much easier way to do this, but if I come over here and hold shift and pick that surface and pick these all the way around, don't be afraid to let the shift button go. You actually can let go of the shift button and then re-pick back up the shift button and continue to add boundaries in, and then there's the result. Okay, so just letting go of the shift button doesn't start anything over, it doesn't mess you up. All you have to do is go back in, hold the shift button again, because if you had to hold the shift button, you wouldn't be able to turn your model because the shift button would be on, right? You wouldn't be able to use your middle click to turn the model. So this is loop surfaces technique, and then also boundary or seed and boundary technique when it comes to surface selection. Again, hopefully that helps you out. Just some easier ways to select multiple objects, okay? All right, so just some selection stuff. We'll get into some datums now. So a little different part for that. Let me open this up. All right, one thing I wanted to talk about, especially for those of you that are using Creo 2, sometimes I find this to be a little bit of a confusing thing, okay, is that all I'm going to do here is just pick a surface and get into Sketch. We're not going to start an actual extrude first, but if you haven't noticed so far that there are two different types of essentially datum objects that you will find within Sketcher. There are these that are over here on the right, and there are these that are over here on the left. Now, there's a reason for both of them, and you'll kind of see why here when I go through this, but there's some really important things to understand about it. First of all, these are construction objects, and it doesn't say centerline construction until you actually get into the to the highlight, which is centerline, create a 2-point construction centerline. If you come over to these are 2-point geometry centerline. Now, a lot of the times where the confusion comes from is what's the purpose of these? This is the purpose of them. I'm going to come in and create these as construction objects, and I'll do the exact same thing in some form over here of geometry objects. Now, there they are. When I finish, though, notice how what shows up outside of Sketcher. It's the geometry objects. Now, at this point in time, I can reference those for anything else. You know, whether it's rotation points or, excuse me, points for points patterns or whatever it may be. But when you get into your sketch and you're looking at your sketch, these are geometry objects. These are specific for construction of your sketches only. Now, the one thing that you have to realize about this is very important, is that the only one that you can rotate around for revolves is that one. And nobody really tells you that. You can put this center line in and try to revolve around it, but it just kind of stares at you when you get out of Sketcher and says, well, I still need a rotation axis. This is the only one that you can put in and rotate around at that point in time for revolves, okay? So these are geometry objects that you can reference outside of Sketcher. These are objects that stay within inside the sketch and are just for constructions only. Now, while we're at it here, in case you haven't noticed this was, I can't remember if this was a Creo 1 or 2 or Wildfire 5. I'm tending to lean more towards Creo 1 or 2, is that you can come in and create lines, and most of us are familiar with the lock function, right? You can go in and lock dimensions. But what you can do now, at least in Creo 2, I can't remember if you can do it in 5, is that you can lock entities. Now, what the difference is we can go in and pick a dimension and right-click and do a lock, right? Pretty easy. Okay? But you also can come in now, pick a entity, right-click, and say, I want to lock that entity. Now, what that does is that it prevents you from manipulating that entity by dragging. See how when I pick on a point and I cannot drag it back and forth? I can drag on these, but I cannot drag that individual entity back and forth. And when I highlight it, you kind of see that little, it's not the greatest illustration in the world, but it's a little locking thing that you see right about there, okay? It prevents you from dragging. Now, that doesn't mean, though, that I can't go in and change dimensional values. I can change dimensional values, but I cannot drag it at that time. So it prevents me from dragging. So locking an entity within Sketcher is prevention of dragging, not locking dimensionally. Change dimensionally, but you can't drag it anymore at that point in time. All right? So the differences between these guys and then locking of entities, okay? A locking of entities within Sketcher. Okay, here's this one. Now, Most guys are fairly familiar with this, okay? And this is kind of an interesting way to do it, but the creation of coordinate systems. Now, let me see if let's do this also here, because this kind of puts this in perspective. Creating a coordinate system. If you've always created coordinate systems, again, and you can still do this even now, but when you go to create a coordinate system within even in Wildfire 5 and forward, they change kind of how coordinate system are constructed. Now, most guys, when they go create a coordinate system, they'll say coordinate system, and they'll hold the control button, and then they'll pick X, Y, and Z. And you can still do that, obviously, and then you go into orientation, and then you go in and flip it and put your positive Z, positive X and Y dimensions or directions in whatever way you want. You can still do that, no big deal. But by default now, when you go to create a coordinate system, it's actually what is called an on-surface coordinate system. And the reason that PTC has changed that is because now in their sheet metal die and punch placement, also in the UDF placement idea, there is something called on-surface coordinate system placement. Now, what happens is if I go to create a coordinate system and I drop it right there, notice how Z is immediately dropped, and it is perpendicular to the surface that I put in. It assumes that idea, okay? Now, from here, all I have are my little drags, okay? These are no different than you would see within the hole tool. You drag it to X and you drag it to Y. So if I come in here and drag this guy, whatever I attach it onto first becomes X. Whatever I attach it to after that becomes Y. Now, I am essentially dragging this around, no different than why would a hole, but what you can do is under the orientation is that you have the ability to add rotation. So you don't have to create coordinate systems at angles just to build your coordinate systems anymore. You can just drop it perpendicular to a surface, drag X and Y, and then at that point in time, you now can come in and drag at an angle you want. Where this really makes a big difference, and I'll show you this a little bit later, especially in the UDF part of it, is that now if I can relate all of my UDF building or my features for a UDF to an on-surface coordinate system, when I go to place that on-surface coordinate system or go place that UDF, all I have to do is place the on-surface coordinate system, and you place the entire UDF, which is really nice compared to all of the picks and clicks and references. And I'll show you a good example of that here in just a little bit, okay? So this is on-surface coordinate system. By default, this is what you are doing for on-surface coordinate systems, or this is how it goes. There's on-surface coordinate system, all right? Shut down a few of these guys. Okay, so a little bit about the hole tool. Now, let's cover this one first. So everybody knows what a hole tool does, or the hole is, right? If I go ahead and put a hole in and I attach it here, and then I attach it here, something like that, okay, right? What they don't notice, or what you might not have paid attention to, is this. This is called the lightweight hole feature. Now, what this does, and I'll pick it and you can see this, is that it turns this guy into essentially what is called a lightweight hole. Now, what's the purpose of this? The purpose of this is that a lot of us will create a hole and then pattern it 100 times, 200 times, or 1,000 times. The problem with that is that regeneration of the pattern that you are doing is difficult, and it just bogs your machine down. If you put in one hole and you pattern it 100 times or 200 times, you find that your regeneration cycle increases dramatically. So what this does is that instead of actually building the geometry, what it does, and you can see this, it puts the axis and an outline in there. You still can pattern that hole and copy that hole and do all your regular functions with it, but you're not actually creating the geometry. So as you are going through working on this model, the model regenerates, instead of regenerating all that geometry, it just regenerates essentially the sketch. And so in turn, your regeneration cycle increases. Now, can you leave it that way? Obviously not, because really the only thing that exists is the sketch. So when you are done working on your model or you're finished with your design, you would come back into this hole, do an edit the definition, uncheck this, go back in, and you only have that regeneration one time, not the 30 times that you regenerate throughout the day, okay? So it is what is called the lightweight hole feature, and it is based more on anything else than anything else, being able to regenerate especially large patterns quicker is just a click of the button. You say OK, and then again, if I would have picked it, you would have saw just the outline instead of the hole itself. This is what is called the lightweight hole feature. All right, if you've never done this before, this is holes. These are holes on points, okay? There's my point that I created right there. You can kind of see that guy right there. Right there it is. If I start a hole, if you've never done this before, you can pick a point, okay? Now, you actually can kind of get some of this done on, on this. Essentially, this is a straight cylindrical surface. You can do this with the regular hole, right? But if I come over here and put the, move this guy and put him there, and again, kind of make some just general assumptions. We don't care too much about where it goes. Right? I can go ahead and put a hole onto a point, which is kind of unique and kind of interesting. Okay, so this is hole on a point. Notice how it stays perpendicular to the surface, and all I did was pick that point, and now that hole goes through that point. In this case, it's perpendicular to that surface, and there you can see is your cutout that you get. Okay, so this is hole on a point. Hole on a point, right? So just some features that you might not have been aware of, the lightweight hole feature, and then also putting a hole on a point and driving it through a surface like that. There it is for hole tool, all right? All right, let's open up the draft extended one. Okay, so a little bit about draft, right? A lot of us know that obviously you can put in draft and you can pick some few surfaces and do draft, but there are certain situations that you run into from time to time that can cause you some few problems, so we'll go through those. But what I'll do here is just say, hey, use the draft tool. I want to draft this surface. Here's my hinge right up here at top, something like this, and you can draft. The problem is that if you want to put that much draft in, at this point in time, you're overlapping, right, or you're going out beyond the surface. If you haven't ever seen this before, under your options, there is an extend and intersect surface. Well, this is the surface that we're intersecting. So if I go ahead and pick it, notice how it cuts that off, okay? So there it is. Once we get past that surface, instead of just dragging that angle out farther and we get a little dog ear hanging out in space, right? When I go in and do this, I now am extending that surface so it cuts it off. I still get the draft that I want, but I continue on with that surface. You will find that under the extend intersect surfaces function. There it is. That's what it looks like with it off. That's what it looks like with it on. Now, draft, again, these are a little bit simpler tools within the draft or simple functions. Most of us have probably found these, but I will kind of cover them. I want to draft that surface right there. My hinge will be this guy right here, and again, we know we can draft. If you right-click, sorry, it's not there. Under Angles, if you right-click and say Add an Angle, at this point in time, you're putting in variable draft. So I can say on this side, I want my draft, I want different draft angles from one side to the next. There it is, and this is variable draft, right? Variable draft. So there it is. There's my variable draft, and again, essentially what I have are just different angles from one side to the next. It's just a matter of going to Angles, right-clicking and saying Add in another angle, and again, you can have variable draft. Pretty easy to put in, and some kind of interesting results that you have right there, okay? Variable draft. Now, other draft things that you can do. Okay, most of us know what split draft is. So if I come over here and do draft, right, again, pick the surface. If I go ahead and pick my draft hinge as that surface, we know that we're pivoting about essentially, or I shouldn't say surface, but that datum plane. I'm pivoting about that datum plane. Now, you have the ability to go in and say split it by the draft hinge, and you can have independent draft on one side compared to the other. But what a lot of us don't know or haven't ever used before is that if I go in and instead of me picking that as a datum plane, you actually can pick a curve, okay? And in this case, notice how now I'm drafting about that individual curve. And so that curve can be any shape that you want, right? It could just be at an angle. So if I created a sketch from this point here to this point there, I actually have a nice variable, or essentially a kind of a different configured variable draft that I have. But in this case, I created a curve on the surface. There it is. I drag it back and forth. I can come in and say, you know what, I only want to split that side right there, and then there's the draft that you get. So not only can you create the split about an individual datum but you also can create that split about a curve, and then there's your results. Okay, so there is creating draft. We've got variable draft, intersecting of the surfaces, the extension surface, and then also splitting that draft and then splitting it about something else besides a datum plane. All right, a little bit about draft. All right, this is a kind of a seldom used tool, mostly because most of our users just don't see it, but it can be very powerful, especially if you're creating these type of features. But there's always been the rib feature, especially for those of you in Wildfire 4. There's always been the profile rib. They introduced something called the trajectory rib in Wildfire 5, and most of us just don't mess with it. If you have, it's kind of cool to see and how much work it does. But what it allows me to do is create ribbing features, but almost in a swept type idea. And I have to kind of show this to you. It's a little bit hard to explain, okay? But what I'm going to do is just come in and say I'm going to create a sketch, and I'm going to say I want ribs to extend somewhere about right there. Notice how I'm not touching the actual edges or the ends or any of that other stuff. And I'll say I want another one right about there, okay? Now I'll explain why you can do this here in just a second, but let me get through this and I'll show it to you. And what I'll do is say I want to create a trajectory rib. And what it does, it takes that sketch, extends it down and out to intersecting surfaces. Now, not only can I do that, but I also can say I want draft and I want rounds on the bottom and also on the top of this feature. Now, this is quite a bit of work, so it does take a little bit to regenerate this. But my final result, and you can change values for radiuses, and then also for your draft. There it is. But this is the result that you get. So if you put a lot of rib features in, this is a great tool. Now, here are the rules behind this tool. Is that first of all, the sketch that I have to create must be below the waterline, what I like to call the waterline, or essentially that sketch must be at the surface or below the surface. And the reason is that it goes from that sketch down, okay? Also, it intersects by pushing, let me get a little bit of better position on that, by pushing that curve out to a surface. So if I had created a curve somewhere right here and it didn't intersect or connect to a surface, this would fail. So it pushes out to, essentially it has to be in a bathtub, if you think it like that. It has to go out to the edges of the bathtub, and it has to be at or below the water line of the bathtub for this to work, okay? At that point in time, I have the ability to add in draft, also add in radiuses, and this is what is called the trajectory rib. Trajectory from sweep, if you kind of make that correlation, and then the rib tool. And that is quite a bit of work. If you ever go in and try to create ribs in this manner, you know that's quite a bit of work that you have to do. Okay, I could have created, again, if I had a wall over here, I could add it in another sketch, and again, it will just follow along. And this is what is called a trajectory rib, okay, a trajectory rib feature. Okay, this is shells. Everybody knows pretty much what a shell does. And I'll show you a few things about this, and some good, some bad. But if you haven't ever, you create a shell, everybody creates shells at some point in time. But what they usually don't do is exclude certain objects from a shell. Okay, and so if I come in here and say I want to shell this object, I'm going to come in and put in something fairly small. As you can see here, that kind of went haywire for my this guy right here. But let's say this is something very basic. But I have essentially this little briefcase, right? It's not really a briefcase, but you got to get the idea. Is that I can come in here and say, hey, I just want this shell to be that way. But what if you don't want the surfaces of the handle to be shelled out? I only want the body to be shelled out. Okay, you can do that under the options idea. So under the options, you have something called excluded surfaces. Now, I can go in here and try to pick individual surfaces, or if I go to details, I can come in here and say I want this guy, and I use the shift button here. Oh, sorry guys, let's do that over. And there we are. So I'll say I want this guy, hold the shift button, seed and boundary, This is going to be my boundary. And then notice how all of those surfaces selected. So at this point in time, instead of the shell trying to shell out the handle, also I excluded this the handle from the shell. That's a mouthful. The handle from the shell, and then all it does is shell out this. And again, I can show that by going into view, getting in my section, and then as I drag this back, you can see that that handle is not shelled out. It's just the actual body of that guy itself. Okay, so there is shelling excluding surfaces. Okay, excluding surfaces. Now let's go back. Let's deactivate that. I accidentally put in 2 shells. Let's delete that. Okay. One thing about this, if you've ever done a shell before, and this is it's kind of goofy, but it's the nature of the tool, is that you can come in here, say, all right, there's my first thickness. But I also want another thickness, and I want this thickness to be that much, okay? And then if you go in and look at it, again, if I activate this guy, you will see the difference in thickness that you have. The problem is, let's see if I can do this. Hopefully I can do this. The problem is that if you come in and let's say you had a round right here, it gets kind of weird, to be honest with you. You can put in these multiple thicknesses, but what you found is that back in Wildfire 4, essentially the software, the shell would just fail if you had a round out here when you put in this multiple thickness. Well, in Wildfire 5, they fixed this, but what it does is something weird and honestly is not really usable, is that it will do this. And that's really not acceptable. You essentially have this little knot, or essentially this little step in here, right, that doesn't work for you. So if you're going to do something like this, the best way if you're going to put in multiple thicknesses is to actually put in a round like this after the fact. It really is the only way to get something done. So if you have a round before and you put in multiple thicknesses, we'll put in this kind of weird step, but in turn, what you probably should do is just get rid of the round and then put in the rounds after the fact, and then you'll get a good result from that. Okay, so just a little bit of advice when you're doing multiple thicknesses and rounds, all right? Or excuse me, rounds and multiple thicknesses in shells. Okay, a little bit of round work. Some interesting things in the round work if you haven't ever gotten to these. Let's do it on this one, okay? So again, I'll start out with some simple stuff. Variable round, if you haven't ever put in a variable round, we start the round tool, right? At this point in time, I can right-click, say make variable, do something like that, right? Now I have variable round. That's pretty straightforward, right? Most everybody knows what to do with those, okay? Some other ones that you might not have done before is that if you come over here and say round, put a round on this edge right here, but if you right-click, you can say through a curve, and what it does is if you have a sketched curve, notice how the radius value is based off of the shape of the curve. And again, you can do that over here, obviously, pick the same thing, right? But the radius value, by right-clicking, you see through curve, is now based off of the sketch that you have put in. So all this is just a sketch on the surface, radius value based off of the sketch that you put in. This is a curve through a round, okay? Curve through a round. Or, sorry, round through a curve, sorry about that, round through a curve. Now, the other thing that a lot of users don't use, some mold guys and some surfacing guys have to deal with this, but it's what is called round transitions. Let's turn off all our datum objects so you can see this. Now, some softwares, some other softwares kind of bite the bucket, or bite the bucket when you go through this stuff, right? But if I come over here and pick this edge, what we run into is what happens when I have a round on this edge of one value, a round on this edge of another one, in turn, and a round on this edge. A lot of times we'll put them in and just base them off the order that we put our rounds in, which is fine, but there are other options that you have. Now, the way that you can manipulate this and get a good result is that I'm going to put in one round at this size, and if I right-click and say add in a set, put in another set at a different size right here, right-click, say add a set, and put in a different size right here, what you will get is essentially what Creo/ProE, because these are transitions are still in the other software, this is the transition that it gives you. But what you have the ability to do is to get into something called transitions mode, okay? And from here, I can pick this transition. A transition is described as either an end stopping of a round or where a round meets another one. Well, we have rounds that meet other values right here. So I'm going to pick it, and what you will see is in this drop-down, it will give you different looks. Now, all of them are not the best looks, but what you will see are different looks that it gives you. Here's corner sphere, which is kind of interesting, right, where it's more of a blending of the round. I can actually drag, drag that back down, the transitions, right? Go back in and drag the transitions. I want a little less of a transition, a little bit more of a transition between them. If I hit the drop down, I say round one side only, and then the last one is what is called the patch, okay? So underneath round transitions. Now, the only way you can really get this to work is if you're using this within the multiple set. Because you're in multiple sets and you're in one feature, it can see all of the interactions between the rounds within that one feature and give you the ability to manipulate those as transitions, okay? So transitions, I'll say again I want the corner sphere, and then there is that result, okay? So it is the converging of multiple radius values all into one corner. You can do that and handle that out of transitions, all right? Out of transitions. All right, I got to keep pushing along here. We're already taking too much time. Okay, blend, okay? Let's do this one, okay? All right, in Creo 2, instead of now in the blend tool where you must select your blends, they kind of revamped this tool and made it a lot easier to use. Underneath the blend tool, okay, you now have the ability to go in and select your edges to blend between. So I'm going to right click and say select sections. I'll say I want this section. There it is. We want that guy right there, okay? I'll right click and say insert another section. We'll start here. Actually, let's start there. Hold the shift button and select all of the rest of them. And then there is your blend. Now, what makes this nice is that notice, because now that you can select your sections, notice how they're not parallel, right? And before, a lot of times our blends were, you had your general blends and rotational blends, and I agree with that, right? But when you created a parallel blend, you had to select, you had to actually create parallel sketches. Well, in this case, now I can blend between non-parallel objects because I can now just select them, and you can see the blend that it does, okay? So there's my blending now between selected objects, okay? Yes, they can be parallel, but they do not have to be. Now, in the traditional blending, which everybody's used to if you're not using Creo 2, you can still do your sketched ones, right? We can still use our sketch ones. Let's turn everything back on so we can see it. If I come over here, say, hey, I want to define my internal sketch, what you'll see now is if I create a shape, we'll just say I want to blend from that shape. There it is. When I'm done, notice how there isn't a toggle. There's no more toggle anymore. All I have to do is drag out to where I want my next section to be, right-click, and say sketch again. Notice how it shows me my other one. Again, I'll create my next section, let's say from here to here, something about like that. When I'm done, notice how I get my blend. Notice how you can drag that blend out. Excuse me. Also, you can come in and drag that sketch. Now, when you want to put in your third section, you right-click and say, I want to insert. It says where do you want to insert at? Insert about right there. Right-click and say sketch. And again, just for simplicity's sake, we'll say we want to blend to that shape. There we are. And now I can continue to come in and push and pull it. Notice how I can go into my sections. Notice how I can insert a section in between. Now, I can reorder them and push them back up and down, okay? So it is the idea of reorder and kind of how they revamp that tool to make it a little bit easier for you to use that within the blend function, okay? One last one that I'll do is a rotational blend. Here's rotational blend. Again, if I come in, we will define internal sketch. There we are. I'll create just a simple center line. We'll just put it somewhere right about there. Right there we are. I'll just create a simple shape. There's my first shape. Oops, no, let's do that. Let's blend so we don't have to create breakpoints. Notice how when I'm done, I can drag it back and forth, right click and say sketch, create another shape. Again, we'll keep it simple. Something about like that. And then now is my rotational blends. For those of you that are not using Creo 2, all this was new for Creo 2, but notice how the blending function has gotten a lot easier. And again, the ability to come in and manipulate the section in real time as I'm creating those types of blends. All right, there's blends. All right, we will go through quickly through variable section sweep. There it is. Now, variable section sweep can be used for a number of different reasons. Okay, the idea of variable section sweep is exactly what it sounds like. Is that it is a sweep, but you are varying the section along the path that you are creating, okay? So you will now find variable section sweep under the sweep tool. Here is constant section, here is variable section. So if I come in and say I want a variable section and I pick this is what is called my spine, okay? This is called my spine. At this point in time, I'm going to right click and say I want to sketch a shape. Now, this in its, on its onset is just a regular sweep, okay? But the idea is it gives you the ability to vary the section in multiple ways. So a lot of times what most people are confused about is what this does, all right? This is what you can do with it. Notice how I sketch this in this orientation. There is something called the X and Y frame. The X and Y frame essentially is when you're looking at your sketch, this is X and this is Y, okay? X and Y and Z. If I come over here, I can actually say, I want this to orient X. Or I want this surface to orient X. Even though I initiated that sketch essentially like this, I now can manipulate the orientation of that sketch by saying my X direction is now actually going to face that guy, okay? Or I want it to face, again, that guy. So even though I started this way, I can have the ability to manipulate it like this, all right? Now, you also can do things where constant normal direction. This has to do with rotation of your sketching plane. I can say constant normal, and I want it to be normal to that. Notice how it pushes along that, essentially that, or this spine right here. Even though we sketched it flat, it is now, and I don't like this terminology, it should say parallel, I don't know why it says normal, but maybe they're talking about Z. But notice how now it immediately rotates that sketching plane into this orientation and then pushes it along that shape, okay, or that spine that you might have. So constant normal direction means I am changing the rotation, or essentially, in my opinion, it's the rotate or the normal of Z, and then pushing it along that spine, okay? So you have X direction, and then you have constant normal direction. Now there are some other ones like normal to projection that we won't get into, but I will get into one more, and then we'll move on, okay? So here is variable section sweep. Variable section sweep. Again, I'll pick my spine. Let's go ahead and create a sketch. Same sketch. Oops, let's back out of that. Sorry, guys. We're going to create, multiple spines. There's our multiple spine. Sorry about that. We'll come in and say sketch. Now, by default, if I come in and say sketch, and there is my shape right here, right? There we are. I'll say OK. By default, nothing really happens, okay? But what I'm going to do is come in and say, you know what? I want my X to point at the chain 1 as long, or as it is following along this spine. So if I pick this guy right here, notice how now the X direction is now going to point at that spine, or the second spine, as it moves along. So as I am moving along, notice how it is rotating, and the end, that X is essentially pointing at the endpoint of that spine. That's what this does. So that's what the second spine, and you can attach this on and manipulate the section itself, but this is what pointing, or essentially saying the X direction needs to point at the second spine as it moves along within that sweep, okay? This is what is called, or these are variable section sweeps and some of the functions around variable section sweep, okay? All right, I have two more to show you, and then I'll try to plow through these so we can leave a little time for the end. All right. Let's do this one first. Let's do the conditional relationship stuff because I kind of assume that a lot of users might get on that. And I'm just going to do a little bit of work. Here. All I'm going to do is create a conditional statement for some for a few holes that we're going to put in. Okay. Now, there we are. I'll go ahead and quickly, put in a hole. Probably should have. I might have actually already done this. There we are. Okay. Kind of drag this guy. And I think I actually already created this. That's an offset. Oh, that's why. Sorry, guys. There we go. Okay. All right. So what I'm going to do here, here's my hole. And what I'll do is I'm going to come in and I'm going to create a pattern of that hole. Pretty straightforward. Now, I'll say pattern, and we'll just make it a pretty straightforward directional pattern. Okay, we'll flip it, go the other way. We want to put 50 units in between them, and then I'll put in 6 of them. Okay, not 66. There we go. Okay. Now, what we have here, pretty straightforward. We have a pattern within, and these are fairly big units just because I didn't change them. Okay, but a pattern along this little our little extrusion that we have. Now, what you have the ability to do, if I go back to this, is to put in conditional statements within a relationship. And you can do this in a great number of instances. This is a very basic that we're doing. And what it uses are essentially equal to, not equal to, and if and else statements to do that. So for instance, let's say that in this case, we know that if our block is this long, we want 60, but if it is another length, and I'll show you that here in just a second, we want to put in 12 of them, okay? So we have 6 within this length, but if we have a greater length, we want to put in 12. What you have the ability to do is within a relation, put in essentially conditional statements. Now, the way this is going to work here, and let me put in a nice whole number so it makes it easy for me. There it is. Okay, there we are. Now, I'm going to come up into my tools and relations, okay, and what I'll do is I'm going to say if dimension 29 is equal to 400, then this pattern of holes, oops, just one, will be equal to, actually, sorry, double equal signs, sorry, will be equal to 6, okay? It is, and I'll go end if. Hopefully I can get this right the first time. If not, what I'll do here is we'll do a Control-C, there's Control-V, okay? If dimension is equal to 800, we want the same one to be 12, all right? See if I can get that right the first time. There it is, okay? Now, verified my relationships, pretty straightforward. Now, if I come over here and change this, let's repaint my screen, there it is. If I change this to 800, notice how the number of pattern members increase. And I base that all off of going into my relationships and creating if this dimension is equal to this, then the pattern members equal that. If the dimension is equal to this, then the pattern. You can do this for a million different things, okay? I was working with the customer, and we also did this for parameters, right? If the parameter value is equal to this, or how about this? If the parameter value doesn't have a value, put in a dash. If it has a value, then you're good. But we actually put it in so that at that point in time, the repeat region would fill out correctly. So if they had a user that didn't fill it out, it would actually put in a dash, so they would get a dash and they can see that instead of the repeat region kind of freaking out and not filling out the way they want it to. All right? So this is conditional statements within relations. All right? Now, I wanted to get into UDFs, but we're kind of pushed up against time, and I want to make sure that I get to some questions here. Let me see what questions we have. Okay, let's see here. Wow, okay, a lot of questions. Okay, so let's start at the top, okay? Can you have more than 2 draft angles for Colby? Absolutely. You can put in multiple draft angles. Essentially, you go in, you right-click, and you say add in another draft angle, and you got it, okay? Colby, do me a favor, send me an email, or Colby, sorry, maybe we can do a little web session, and I'll show you again on that points, okay? I'll show you my information here in just a second, and do that. Can the trajectory rib be curved? Yes, it can be curved on the trajectory rib as long as it doesn't interfere with some intersection stuff. Again, maybe if we get on a web session, I can kind of show you that, okay? Walter, what release of Creo am I running? I am running, I can't remember off the top of my head. I am running release M50. Okay, I am running release of M50. Mr. Peoples, I am the pencil tool I'm using is out of the GoToMeeting interface. So that's in the GoToMeeting interface. Walter, yes, you have to have the same number of edges. That rule has not gone away. Okay, has not gone away. Okay. Conditional relation cheat sheet. Colby, I can send you something. Again, just send me an email and I can kind of send you some of the stuff that I have. I will try to sneak that into you, okay? Mr. Brad, I've heard a few things about Creo 3 on the release of Creo 3 and what's in there. There will now in Creo 3 be an embedded fastener library that you can easily access, okay? Besides that, I've heard some things here and there, but nothing that PTC will commit to. But from what I have been told, out of the interface of Creo 3, there will be an embedded fastener library, which I think is kind of cool. Okay. All right. Those are the questions that I see for right now. We wanted to put in a few more things right at the end. I will let my buddy Jason Harderback pop in, and he wanted to say a few things. Jason, are you still there?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, so we'll kind of finish up with this, and again, you know what, let me go to this and let me show this while we're right here from the current slide. Guys, this is my information right here. If you have questions, feel free to shoot me some stuff, and I'll get back to you as soon as I can, but go ahead, Jason, and go ahead and finish this thing up for us, okay?
All right, I just wanted to mention to everybody we have the advanced modeling using Creo Parametric 2.0 training class coming up in our Kansas City facility on December 2nd through the 4th. And in our New Jersey facility right outside of Philadelphia, November 18th through the 20th. If you get a lot of benefit out of this, you know, in 1 hour, think what you can get out of 3 days. Take a real quick show you here some of the things that the class covers. Some of it's stuff Ben did today, some of it's outside of there. So if you guys want this or any other training class, if it's not on our schedule, like Ben said, we'll be happy to add it. We'll be happy to go ahead and put it on our schedule at a facility near you, or if you have people around you that want it, we can do it there, do it on site. We can customize classes. So just let us know if you need any help with training.
There was one question that asked, can you provide me a copy of the PowerPoint presentation? Thank you, Jason. I'm sorry, were you done? I'm sorry, bud.
Yeah, I'm done.
Jason, yeah, okay. I didn't want to interrupt you, I'm sorry. We actually put these webcasts on the on YouTube. So Jason, do we send out the YouTube link to our users still? Or
yes, I'll send it out in a follow-up email tomorrow. So okay. They should get it there, and they can also, from the email I sent, they'll have our link. Our signatures always have a link in there also. So.
Okay, yeah. So you'll be able to go to the YouTube channel, our YouTube channel, and look at that also. Okay. Do you have a webcast on UDF? No, I don't, Robert. Jason, does this thing have a hard stop at at 1?
No, you can keep
I
on
guess
going.
we're still on. Okay. Yeah. All right. So for those of you that want to stay on, here's a little UDF stuff. Okay. For those of you who want to stay on, I'll show this here real quick. Can you give me here? I'll make myself the presenter.
I'll give you control.
There you go. Attendees, there it is. Staff. All right. There we go, bud. There it is. Show my screen. Okay. So for those of you that are hanging around and want to see a little UDF stuff, here you go. Okay. All right, so a little bit of UDF work. Now, what I have here is, it's not safe, if I open up, where's it at? Where's my create? There it is. Okay, the concept of UDF, okay? The idea of UDF is to create a feature that is your feature, hence user-defined feature, based off of number of features. Now, what you'll notice here, and it's a little bit of background work, and it's kind of sneaky if you don't pay attention to this, but there is a coordinate system that has been created, and that coordinate system, like we talked about before, is what is called a user-defined coordinates, or excuse me, an on-surface coordinate system. Okay. Now, from here, there were 3 datums that were created based off of that coordinate system, and then from there, these objects all related either to the coordinate system or the datum planes themselves. Now, what makes this useful is that because essentially all of them in the end are now based off of that coordinate system, when I go to create my UDF, all I have to do when I place my UDF is place the coordinate system, because they're all essentially grandfathered back to the coordinate system. Okay. Now, under Tools, you will find something called UDF Library. And under UDF Library, you have the ability to create, obviously, a UDF library. Now, let me make sure my working directory is set for this. Sometimes it gets a little goofy if I don't. Let's go. Oh, why can't I see that? There we go. Okay, good. I want to make sure. So I'll go in and say, all right, I want to create a UDF. What is it? We'll call it the Ben UDF. There it is. All right. It says, is it standalone or is it subordinate? Subordinate means is that the original UDF changes, then all of my subsequent UDFs will change, which can be kind of cumbersome and kind of goofy, but that you can do that, okay? So I'll say it's a standalone UDF. It says, do you want me to include the reference part? No, I don't. I just want to be able to place it. Now, I'm going to go in and say, I want from this object, hold the shift button, to that object. These are the things that I want to put in my UDF. I'll say, okay. There we are. I'll just say, okay, to do this. We won't worry about too much like that, okay? And when I'm done, I'll say I'm done, return. Now, what most people don't concentrate on is varied objects, okay? You have the ability to vary certain dimensions when the UDF is placed. So this makes this kind of interesting. So when I go to place the UDF, if I wanted my users to be able to modify diameters and depths and diameters and depths and other, even the number of pattern members, you can vary those specific ones. Now, we won't do that for that, right? We won't do this for this, but where it gets nice is that once I created this UDF, note how it says UDF right here, if I go in and open up, and I have a little UDF placement part right here, I'll come in and say, I want to, where's that guy at? I can't ever remember where UDF is at. User, oops. User, where's that at? It's on there. Yeah, there it is. Under user-defined feature, okay, there's the Ben UDF, okay. I'll say, all right, I now want to place that. All I'm going to do is place the on-surface coordinate system. So if I drop it there, make my one reference, make the next reference, I can drag it around if I want to, and also, because that on-surface coordinate system has rotation involved, I can come in here and rotate that UDF. Also, if I had varied objects, I would be able to come into my options, right, and modify individual values. So I would be able to modify diameters and depths and pattern members and all that stuff from the original one, okay? So it allows me to take multiple features, combine them into one user-defined feature, and then place that, but it makes it really nice when you don't have to go through reference prompts. If we had made all of those features based off of these datum planes and I didn't include those, I literally would have to replace every single reference that referenced that UDF, which can be cumbersome and difficult for them to place. Okay. So anyway, very simple, short UDF stuff that you see right there. Okay. And again, if you have more specific questions, feel free to ask me at any other point in time. Okay. One last question: can these be used in mold as a surface for a side? I'd have to see a little bit more about. I'd have to see more of the specific application, Robert, that you are looking for. Okay. Again, shoot me a little email. Maybe we can do something in a different one. How do you save the UDF into the library? Okay. There is a config.pro option, guys. One config.pro option that will save where your configs go, or where that does go. I believe it is this one. Pro group directory is where your UDF library comes from. Pro group directory. And then they will save directly into your user-defined library. If not, it goes into your working directory. All right. I'm going to cut it off right there. Okay. Again, if you have more questions, feel free to ping me. Thanks for hopping on today, guys. I know we went a little bit over, but everybody was asking quite a few questions about the UDF. Thanks for hopping on. We'll shut it down here in just a second. Again, we're having these every Thursday now. We'd be happy if you guys hopped on. Hopefully you can picked up some good stuff from today. Thanks a bunch, and appreciate it for getting on.
Thank you, everybody.